Portugal 2, Czech Republic 1, another game where the big side hasn't really done enough to convince, but ultimately just about done enough to secure a valuable 3 points. So let's get straight into it and talk about what we saw from a tactical point of view in this game, because we saw a Portugal side dominating the ball, but facing an aggressive and a really resilient Czech Republic defence. So let's have a look at how it played out tactically. Starting off at the back, where Czech Republic were reasonably aggressive. They weren't looking to get 11 men behind the ball and sit super deep. They were looking to apply pressure reasonably high up the pitch without ever really fully committing to a full-blown press. Now, Portugal had quite a good solution to this, and it was using Diogo Costa in the back four. So Mendes, the left centre-back, would move to left back, Diaz would move to the right, Pepe to the left, and Costa could come into this little space here just to give Portugal that extra man to help play out from the back. It wasn't a massive part of this game, but it was just something they'd done which I thought was quite useful, and it certainly aided them in these areas. But realistically, this game was more about a little bit higher up the pitch, Portugal in their back three shape, and the Czech Republic looking to get most of their players behind the ball. Now, again, I don't want that to come across as critical of the Czech Republic, because yes, they got players behind the ball, but they didn't park the bus. They were very aggressive with their approach, despite often sitting quite deep. The challenge for Portugal was basically, can you break it down? And they used quite an interesting system to try and do that. And it started off, I think, because of some interesting personnel choices, including, for example, Cancelo as left wing back. You see, when Cancelo plays wing back, he's not going to exactly fly around the outside and provide overlaps. He was inverting into a midfield position in here, which is rare for a wing back to do. We often see full backs do it, but for a wing back to do it is something a little bit different, which was nice to see. This meant, though, that Portugal needed width on the left-hand side, so Rafa Leao would then pull wider out here. And then on the right-hand side, we had a very different dynamic. Bernardo Silva is coming inside into these spaces, and Diogo Dalot is pushing forward down the right-hand side to provide the width. Then in the middle, we've got Bruno Fernandes often playing as a deeper midfielder, although not always, and Vitinha given the licence to push a little bit further forward. Although, to be honest, there was a lot of rotations in these areas. The likes of Cancelo, Vitinha, Bruno Fernandes, Bernardo Silva were constantly rotating. We could see several different players at different times playing in the double pivot. On that double pivot, it didn't last too long because Portugal soon wanted to push men forward and try and suffocate this Czech Republic side. So what we saw it become was more of a 3-1-3-1 shape, or at times a 3-1-6 as all of these players push further forward. But what Portugal are essentially trying to do is overload the middle of the pitch. With Cancelo, Fernandes, Vitinha and Bernardo Silva up against three midfielders, Portugal had the chance to create overloads. But this is where the Czech Republic deserve credit, because what we've seen some teams do at this tournament is be really passive in these situations. So when there has been this overload in midfield in certain games, we have seen it almost just allowed to happen. But not in this game, because as someone like Bernardo Silva would look to drift a little bit deeper, the Czech Republic were willing to kind of let a centre-back follow them and be aggressive in these areas of the pitch. Same on the other side as well. If Cancelo received the ball too high up the pitch and the Czech Republic sensed danger, they were willing to let one of their centre-backs go out towards the ball to be aggressive in these areas and to apply pressure, which again is why Czech Republic deserve credit. Yes, they were very defensive with their approach, but this wasn't just park the bus football. They were aggressive with their defensive ideas, unlike what we have seen from most teams at this tournament. So I thought that was really effective from the Czech Republic, and they defended really well. With Czechia defending so well for large parts of the game, the question was ultimately, can Portugal break them down? Can they move the ball quick enough and create good enough chances? And this is actually where Portugal struggled quite a lot, particularly in the middle of the pitch. They struggled to find spaces, they struggled to find players in pockets of space on a regular basis, again because of a good solid defensive shape from the opposition. But this meant that more of Portugal's kind of luck and fortune and success, if you like, came outside of the Czech Republic shape. So when Cancelo would actually drop a little bit deeper on the left-hand side, when Bernardo Silva would drop deeper on the right-hand side. And this allowed Portugal to move the ball forward a bit more effectively. Again, outside of this Czech shape. Czech have really kind of crowded the middle of the pitch, so Portugal found space outside of that shape. But the problem was this led to a slight lack of balance, because we can see, first of all, Portugal haven't exactly now got numbers in the middle of the pitch, with Fernandes and Vitinha a little bit isolated. But also, the dynamics just didn't quite feel right to me. Bernardo Silva and Diogo Dalot down the right-hand side, when you're looking to break down a low block, isn't particularly effective, because Bernardo Silva is quite safe when he plays out wide. He rarely looks to take a man on. He always wants to come back inside, be safe, retain the ball on his left foot. And Diogo Dalot may have had a brilliant season, but he's not a player who wants to be a 1v1 threat all day long. He will carry the ball occasionally, and he will be successful on occasion as well, but he's not really a player up against a deep defence who you rely on to regularly go 1 versus 1. And as a result, Portugal really lacked threat down the right-hand side. This meant that they were extremely reliant on the combinations on the left. And again, the balance wasn't quite right for me. Nuno Mendes playing at left centre-back felt like the wrong decision because he was given this licence to get forward into these positions here. But then once on the ball, he isn't the sort of player who is incredibly skilled when it comes to penetrating the ball through the opposition. He's not someone who's going to pick a pass into the feet of Ronaldo or slide Cancelo into a channel. And I felt that he made some poor decisions on the ball. In terms of the rest of the left-hand side, Cancelo had a decent game without ever really grabbing it by the neck, but I thought he'd done a good job in his role. He kept the ball well for his side. The threat was realistically Rafa Leão, who is of course a brilliant 1 versus 1 player looking to take on his man. This was the big threat that I felt for Portugal. Down the left-hand side, Rafa Leão looking to take his man on. Again though, when you are relying on 1v1 threat from a winger, it's very 50-50. Sometimes they're going to beat their man and you look like you can be really dangerous going forward. On another occasion, you are just going to get tackled every time and suddenly you lose all your threats. So Portugal struggled here a little bit as well. There wasn't really enough threat out wide. The threat, realistically, the main threat, came from this man here, Bruno Fernandes, who for me was the best player on the pitch and put in arguably the best performance of the tournament so far. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Yes, playing a slightly different role to what he normally does, where he's dropping deeper, but his forward passing, it's just phenomenal, right? It's just phenomenal. We've all seen it before. He is just so good with his creativity on the ball. His ability to find a pass out of literally nowhere. The one he slides through to Ronaldo at one point, granted Ronaldo was offside, but the ball he slides through was just phenomenal. But the problem was, he felt like the only one to me that was ever really going to create something for Portugal. He felt like the only one who had that bit of magic in him to do that. Rafa Leão maybe on the left-hand side, but outside of that, Portugal lacked that creative threat. And ultimately, for large parts of the game, they were reduced to getting the ball into this sort of space here. Again, kind of just outside the Czech Republic structure. They were reduced to getting the ball in these areas and almost relying on crosses, almost single-handedly relying on crosses into the box of Cristiano Ronaldo. And it left Portugal looking a little bit flat for large parts of the game in possession. Of course, late on in the game, things changed with substitutes, but for large parts, Portugal struggled, and I actually felt that the Czech Republic could have got at them a bit more because their defensive structure was good, but they also could have had more of a threat going forward.
So before we continue into the video, a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, jerseyfifa.com, the home of all of the greatest football kits. Whether that be the new latest releases or the old classic ones like this, Jersey FIFA has something for everyone, and now you can check it out yourself using the link in the description down below. And also make sure to use code JerseyFIFA for 10% off when you order.
Now when it came to the Czech Republic trying to play forward and provide some attacking threat, it was fairly obvious quite early on what they were trying to do. When the goalkeeper had the ball, they would split into this shape, kind of a 2-2-4-2 shape. Sometimes the fullbacks would be a little bit deeper as well. But basically the aim is, let's get the ball incredibly long, try and win the physical battle up front and get on the second ball. And I really feel that they could have made more of this if they were a little bit braver with the positioning of certain players. So the first ball would go long, and the front two done a decent job of winning their battles. Granted, Pepe, Diaz and Mendes also done a good job defensively, but there are always going to be situations in a game like this where you can win the first ball. It's about can you get on the second ball. This is where the Czech Republic just almost weren't really brave enough, because there were spaces in midfield. You see, Portugal at times were man-to-man on the last line. They were man-to-man on the last line, but at the back, Portugal always had a spare man. Now, if you do the maths, that means that the spare man for Czech Republic is going to be in midfield. That is where the overload is going to be. If the attackers are man-to-man up here, the defence has a +1, there's got to be a spare man in midfield, and Czech Republic did have that. They just were a bit too hesitant, a bit too passive with what they want to do on the ball. If they could have pushed another player further forward for the second ball, I really feel as though they could have had some success, particularly against Bruno Fernandes and Vitinha. As good as they both are, and they both worked incredibly hard, they're not second ball specialists, after that first ball off of Patrick Schick. If Souček could have been given that licence to get forward, I feel that they could have really hurt Portugal, particularly when Portugal started to adapt their shape as well, because what Portugal would do at times is drop the wing-backs a little bit deeper to try and help out the centre-backs in the physical battles. This now also opened up the room for the Czech Republic wing-backs. Again, Czech Republic could have been a little bit braver here. They could have used these players, and there were spells in the game, for a spell in the second half as well, where they could have been a bit more adventurous, a bit more attacking. We saw with the goal that they could really hurt this Portugal team. I feel that they could have done it a little bit more. They, of course, got their 1-0 lead, but from that point, again, they went back to that approach of, let's get men behind the ball, and ultimately, that is what cost them. They went back to this approach of, let's get everyone back here. They're still going to be aggressive in their shape, but for me, they just retreated a little bit too much. If they could have kind of kept up, or even gone one step further with the attack and the long balls and the direct approach, I think they really could have done something to Portugal here, and they could have grabbed a second goal, which would have been huge. But around this time in the game, Czech Republic have just gone 1-0 up. Roberto Martinez did make a good change. I think overall, tactically, he provided a decent structure without it being great. But I think he made a good change here. What he done, this is before he changed personnel, was he just dropped the extra midfielder a little bit deeper. So obviously, as we said previously, it was a bit of a 3-1-6 at times. As Cancelo would move forward, it was a bit of a 3-1-6 like this, and it was a bit too attacking. And when you go 1-0 down, it's easy to continue with that shape, throw loads of men forward. But what he actually started to do was drop the extra player a little bit deeper, and this just made it a little bit easier for Portugal to kind of cycle the ball in the last 20 minutes, but also when they lost the ball, they had the players in these central areas to quickly win it back. And I felt that that just gave Portugal the platform late on in the game to build up some momentum, kind of build the threat around the Czech Republic goal. They got subs on like Neto, who instantly is going to be nice and direct. He's going to get the ball, he's going to take players on, and that's ultimately what made the difference for Portugal. So overall, I would say it was a pretty decent game. Perhaps not the most entertaining, but Portugal, in terms of their structure, were interesting with Cancelo inverting, whilst the right wing back would actually fly particularly high. They were interesting with their shape. It lacked a little bit of balance at times, and the roles weren't quite right, but I would still expect them to click over the next couple of games, and ultimately they still had enough quality players on the pitch to hurt the Czech Republic. And then as for Czechia, yeah, they done pretty well as well. Tactically, I thought they got it spot on. They were, deep but aggressive out of possession, which I think was the key for this particular game and for the rest of the tournament as well. I just think they should have been a little bit more aggressive and a little bit more proactive with the positioning of their midfield on the second ball, and they might have hurt Portugal a little bit more. So, as it ends, Portugal, did they deserve to win? Yeah, in my opinion, they did. They did have the better chances, they did look more threatening, that kind of star quality did show at certain times, particularly with Bruno Fernandes. But it's going to be interesting to see how they do in the next games. Very interested to see what they do. I still think they'll be fine, now top the group and go far in this competition, in my opinion. But yeah, there's certainly room for improvement. Let me know, though, what you think in the comments down below. Who was the best player for Portugal? But also, what was the issue for Portugal? Why did it get stuck a little bit as they moved towards the final third? Let me know what you think in the comments. But apart from that, we are finished for today. So thank you guys for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.